Good morning, everyone. My name is Mallory, and I'm here with my colleagues Maggie, Kyle, and Brian, and we are here to discuss a proposal for Microsoft investing in Spotify. In order to make the most of our time, we have laid out an agenda. We will start by talking about Microsoft's expansion opportunities and briefly discuss our competitors. Then we will talk more about why Microsoft should invest in Spotify using both quantitative and qualitative reasoning. We will then discuss more specifics concerning the proposal, including consideration to be offered. And finally, we will talk about how this investment will affect Microsoft's accounting.
Here at Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Let's talk about how an acquisition of Spotify can help us achieve our mission. We all know that Microsoft has traditionally been a leader in the software industry, but in recent years, we have seen a slight decline in revenues and stock market performance. There are many factors that can contribute to this, but two of the biggest reasons are one, a shift from personal computers to mobile devices in the market, and two, the entrance of new competitors in these markets. The bottom line is, we are struggling to stay relevant in this day and age of pocket devices, and that has contributed to our weaker performance.
Microsoft is a household name. We have successful products all over the spectrum, such as Microsoft Office in the software field, Windows for operating, our Surface tablets and computers, our AI abilities, and our entertainment with Xbox as we push the boundaries in helping all people enjoy video games. But the one industry we have struggled to tap is the mobile market. In 2018, we had less than 0.5% share of the mobile operating system market. We think this is something we can improve. Our CEO has asked our team to identify a suitable investment target that will help us remain profitable and relevant in the near future. We have come up with the answer: acquire a controlling interest in Spotify. For better or worse, mobile phones are a part of almost every aspect of our lives. We use them to communicate, we use them to go shopping, listen to music, play games, and so much more. It is a computer in our pocket, and at Microsoft, we love computers. We are behind the ball in the mobile market, but that does not mean that we cannot catch up. That being said, we do not want to start from scratch in a well-developed market and feel the best entry strategy is to get an established partner. Enter Spotify. Spotify is the world's largest, most popular music streaming subscription service with a community of over 207 million users, including 96 million premium subscribers across 79 markets. They have over 40 million songs and 3 billion playlists. A partnership with Spotify will give us access to over 207 million people and counting almost instantly. The mobile music market is not new to our competitors or the industry. Apple, Google, and Amazon all have their own music streaming services like Apple Music, YouTube Red, and Prime Music. These three players represent some of our biggest competition, and by investing in Spotify, we can now compete on the mobile device platform.
So what's special about Spotify, and why do we feel confident that they can not only compete against our competitors' music streaming services, but are a good investment choice for our company? First, Spotify has an advantage over our competitors because they have been a first mover in countries outside of the United States. While Apple Music may grow inside our borders because of its compatibility with the iPhone, a majority of phone users abroad have non-Apple devices, making them ideal candidates for Spotify. While our competitors may have a presence in other countries, Spotify has made the largest effort to recruit music artists that are not American. As of 2017, Spotify was available in 58 markets worldwide and had 60 million subscribers, 15 million of those being premium subscriptions. Now, in 2019, they have over 40 million songs and 200 million active users, over 96 million being premium subscribers, and are available in 80 markets. Additionally, Spotify most recently launched in India and is currently making moves to replace local streaming services as the #1 subscription in the country, already having signed several of the most popular Indian artists. Spotify's growth abroad has seen exponential growth in its subscribers.
Now we would like to talk about some of Spotify's recent events. Spotify's recent acquisitions show that they are much more than just a music streaming company. They have been focused on buying companies such as the Echo Nest, a music intelligence platform to help them enhance customer experience by developing playlists fit to individual preferences. They are also moving towards companies like Loudar that allows artists to create and market their own content without needing a large music label. Their latest acquisitions of Gimlet and Anchor show their desire to grow in the podcast market.
Now that you're familiar with the direction that Spotify is headed, we want to talk about important synergies that can be gained through our businesses working together. First, we have identified a booming market that Spotify has noticed as well: podcasts. Several of Spotify's most recent acquisitions have been to ensure they are a first mover in the podcast industry. As of 2017, an estimated 67 million people listened to weekly podcasts, representing a 45% increase in listeners since 2015. This number has continued to grow exponentially, especially among 18 to 34-year-olds. Why is this important? First, 18 to 34-year-olds make up a demographic that has been historically hard to reach, but podcasts are an avenue that could be successful in grasping this market. Second, podcast advertisements are, on average, about 90 seconds long, which is much longer than traditional ads. This gives advertisers a better chance at reaching their audience, which in turn encourages them to pay a premium for this ad space. Finally, about 85% of podcast users listen until the end of the podcast, and the average listener listens to 5 podcasts a week. This also increases the number of advertisements listeners come in contact with. Our end goal regarding the podcast market is to market our podcast developer software to artists contracted with Spotify and eventually include a podcast application in our Microsoft Office suite. Our software, paired with Spotify's platform, will help developers edit, upload, and monetize their content.
With the use of Cortana, we will be able to compete with tech giants like Google and Apple in a similar way that they use Google Assistant and Siri respectively. With the integration of our AI systems, we will be able to fully integrate Spotify with Cortana, creating a competitive home assistant that will double as an unparalleled music speaker.
Since 2016, Microsoft has looked to position itself as an industry leader in the field of artificial intelligence. While artificial intelligence is a very broad term that describes a multitude of new technologies, we're going to focus on its cloud services platform. The worldwide cloud infrastructure market saw spending increase 46% in Q4 of 2018. Total cloud spending in the US for 2018 was just north of $80 billion, which is up 46% from 2017's total of $55 billion. The market continues to grow, and Microsoft has placed itself in a position to remain competitive in the space. Although Amazon Web Services maintains its market share of 32% of revenue in the space for 2018, Microsoft's Azure platforms grew its share to 16% compared to 14% from the previous year. This is a very promising return for Microsoft because the company has been ramping up spending for its Azure platform since AI is becoming a bigger focus of the business. Microsoft increased R&D spending for Azure 83% year over year to $13.5 billion, which is the second most in the industry behind Amazon Web Services. This increase in spending has prepared Microsoft to take on bigger clients such as Spotify, offer more services such as the machine learning capabilities of its Azure software, as well as help businesses expand internationally. Cloud computing is already very beneficial for Spotify and 5 segments of Spotify's business, as shown in the slide. Since many of Spotify's resources are tied up in artist licensing deals, cloud computing is low-hanging fruit that Spotify could use to save itself considerable time and money on setting up an infrastructure in the regions of the world where it looks to grow, like India, China, and the Middle East. Microsoft's cloud computing services would assist Spotify in going global because Microsoft has many resources in its target growth countries, and this would help Spotify provide high-quality speed and performance in its streaming services. Microsoft can also offer its machine learning software to help search optimization as well as playlist recommendations for Spotify. According to Billboard, one of Spotify's biggest challenges is balancing high-quality technology with high-quality content, and partnering with Microsoft will allow Spotify to focus on the content. Spotify's current provider of cloud services, Google Web Services, hasn't invested nearly the amount of money into its infrastructure as Microsoft has, and Google wouldn't be able to provide all of the resources that Microsoft could because Microsoft is making its services one of its core businesses, while Google is focusing more on big data applications. For these reasons, it makes strategic sense to end the contract with Google and partner with Microsoft for its cloud services needs. Spotify resembles many tech companies in the early days of its existence. It has yet to turn a profit, spends a lot of money to focus on growth to expand its market share, and has a high valuation relative to its PE ratio. Some positive signs for Spotify is that it has had year-over-year revenue growth, it's maintained its market share as the dominant music streaming service provider, has lowered its loss and profitability year over year, and it has a competitive advantage in the music streaming service industry with its unique personalized playlist recommendations. Unfortunately, Spotify is bleeding cash. With the interests of Apple and Amazon in the industry, margins are becoming razor thin and it's difficult for Spotify to grow, as well as stay competitive with the amount of cash that these tech giants are capable of investing into their business. This has bled Spotify's liquidity dry to where it has a current ratio of about 1.05. Although Spotify has very low liquidity, it has a zero long-term debt-to-equity ratio. Since Spotify has no long-term debt, it could leverage up to compete with other companies in the space if needed. But a capital infusion as well as a strategic partnership with Microsoft would seem to be a much better option for Spotify than issuing debt for the reasons we have discussed previously. Microsoft would give the company much needed cash to fund growth/continuing operations without the company taking on the riskiness of over-leveraging itself via debt financing to shareholders.
In analyzing financial statements, it is important to do both quantitative and qualitative analysis. When we looked at the notes in Spotify's financial statements, these three concerns stuck out to us: securing fair global contracts, obtaining additional capital to fund growth, and stabilizing a volatile share price. We feel that Microsoft can help mitigate these risks by using our expertise to help negotiate fair contracts as Spotify expands globally, supplying them with the capital they need to invest and grow, and provide investors with the stability of one of the only two U.S. companies to receive a AAA bond rating.
Now we are going to discuss acquisition logistics. After doing some analysis on Spotify's position, we think that acquiring a 30% stake for $12 billion would be a very reasonable offer for Spotify to take. Valuing Spotify at its market value of 30% would be approximately $7.5 billion, plus another $4.5 billion of goodwill is where this figure came from. Microsoft would have to pay a premium for its stake in Spotify because of its leading market share in the music streaming services industry, opportunity to take on debt to finance growing operations, and to get shareholder approval of the deal. This valuation would value Spotify for $40 billion, and Microsoft's premium would be 150% of enterprise value. From our perspective, Spotify's influx of cash from the acquisition would improve their liquidity problems, and Spotify would be able to aggressively pursue growth opportunities to improve its market share, as well as build economies of scale to compete in the low-margin business, which is why Microsoft would be willing to pay the premium and Spotify would accept this offer. In analyzing Microsoft's financial position, the company is in a very good position to make an acquisition, being one of only two public companies that has AAA-rated bonds, having over $169 billion in current assets, as well as hitting 52-week highs in the stock market. Microsoft has plenty of options of how it can finance this operation. Microsoft's recent actions have given it this financial flexibility from debt payoffs to share buybacks. Weighing all of these options, we think that Microsoft should acquire Spotify for just cash. Examining Microsoft's current capital structure, making this cash payment would not have an adverse effect on Microsoft's already impressive liquidity or solvency. And paying with just cash as well, this would give Spotify the ability to accelerate its growth plans and pursue new markets. To make the cash available, Microsoft would sell $8 billion of its current short-term investments and take the other $4 billion already sitting in the cash account.
Acquisitions of public foreign entities inevitably involve several accounting issues. The key issues that we decided to look at for this acquisition include separate incorporation, one-time acquisition, foreign currency exchanges, inter-entity transactions, non-controlling interest, and consolidation of their financial statements.
First, let's discuss separate incorporation. Since we are acquiring 30% of Spotify stock, Microsoft would employ the equity method of accounting. According to a guideline established by the Accounting Standards Board, the equity method is presumed to be applicable if 20 to 50% of the outstanding voting stock of the investee is held by the investor. We plan to follow this guideline. Since we are employing the equity method, the acquisition of Spotify will be included in the equity and other investments section of the balance sheet. Since we have historically never dedicated an income statement line to equity investments, we would not start with the acquisition of Spotify. Microsoft will include its share of Spotify's income in its service and other category, as well as its share of Spotify's expenses in the service and other for cost of revenue. With the equity method, there will also need to be a presentation in the statement of comprehensive income under other comprehensive income. Spotify's changes in other comprehensive income will be reflected in Microsoft's balance sheet for its share and Spotify's other changes in other comprehensive income, where the red box is. Also, with our acquisition of Spotify, there will need to be notes disclosed in the financial statements and the year of acquisition, similar to the one featured here with our previous acquisition of LinkedIn. Included will be a valuation of how we reached the number to pay for Spotify, as well as our goodwill calculation.
Let's talk about one-time acquisitions. As we are proposing a one-time 30% stock acquisition, we plan to pay for 30% of Spotify stock with a one-time acquisition of cash following the announcement of acquisition. We can do this by liquidating a portion of our current assets, excluding accounts receivables. Now, moving on to foreign currency exchanges, due to Spotify's reporting currency being the euro, it is imperative that we understand the issues that might arise due to foreign currency exchanges. With our functional currency being the US dollar and Spotify's being the euro, we will have to understand the fluctuations in values between the two currencies. As we have different functional currencies, we will be using a year-end exchange rate method or the current method to report their revenues and sales on our consolidated financial statements. Because we will be acquiring Spotify shares through stock acquisition within a U.S. market, we will not have to hedge any future foreign currencies as there will be no foreign currency exchanges directly correlated with the acquisition itself.
Because we've proposed a 30% stock acquisition, Spotify would not be considered a subsidiary of Microsoft, but rather an investment in which we have significant influence. Therefore, there is no need to account for intra-entity transactions as we would if Spotify were a subsidiary. However, we would still like to mention some related party transactions that would be likely to occur between Microsoft and Spotify and issues we might have when accounting for them. First, we feel that it is not likely that there will be sales of any physical inventory between our companies. Most transactions will be intangible in nature, such as the transfer of data on consumer preferences between Microsoft and Spotify, the sale of AI and cloud services from Microsoft to Spotify, costs billed to Spotify for developing podcast software, and legal fees incurred from contract negotiation, etc. If, in the future, Microsoft were to acquire a majority interest in Spotify, we presume that most of these sales would be downstream, which would require adjustments to our books at year-end to defer unrealized gains and losses on the transfers. These adjustments would be hard to quantify, as it is difficult to determine when an intangible asset has been used up or sold to a third party. Because we are only acquiring a 30% stake in Spotify, we will not have to worry about accounting for a non-controlling interest in the subsidiary or consolidating our financial statements at the end of each fiscal year. However, if we were to acquire a majority of Spotify's stock in the future, these accounting issues would arise. To wrap up, we'd like to summarize a few of our main points. First, we are acquiring Spotify because we think they will boost our revenues and stock market performance by gaining us entry into the mobile device market on a global scale. Second, we believe that many synergies would occur as a result of the acquisition, including gains within the booming podcast industry from sharing AI, consumer data, and cloud services with Spotify, the integration of Cortana and Spotify into a smart home speaker, and providing stability to Spotify's volatile stock price. Third, we have proposed to acquire a 30% interest in Spotify, giving us significant influence in their day-to-day operations by paying with a mix of cash and short-term investments. Finally, we will need to account for several transactions between the two companies, and because Spotify's books are denominated in euros, this may often involve the hedging of foreign exchanges. We will also keep in mind that, if in the future Spotify becomes a subsidiary of Microsoft, this will involve more complex accounting for intra-entity transactions of intangible goods and consolidation of financial statement data at the end of each period. Thank you for your time.